Kickstarter is a bit of a weird place. On one end, you have impassioned campaigns that outline the lifelong dream of a small team who shows so much gratitude for the support they're receiving, eventually putting their product out to the world with everything they promised and more, countless updates that span nearly a decade, maybe even returning to the platform with so much earned trust that they absolutely shatter their new campaign's goals with no issues, and on the other hand, you have people going, hey, I'm gonna disobey the laws of physics, as demonstrated here using After Effects, and people are like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with visual evidence. Here, take my entire life savings. The lack of real checks and balances makes Kickstarter something that you should only engage with if you're spending money that you're absolutely okay with losing. Every Kickstarter page has an explicit risk section that outlines, hey, you might be burning $100 if you do this, be careful. But even though it's gained a reputation for being a little risky, Kickstarter campaigns continue to meet or potentially greatly exceed their goals because of the perks that come with them, both individual and project-wide, the sense of community, and of course, the notion that you're helping someone achieve their goals. I don't think being a backer is a bad thing as long as you're smart about it and have proper rationale, but I also think that despite being smart and understanding the risks, it's completely fair to be upset if it turns out that the money went to waste. Just because you have a certain logical response doesn't mean you're barred from having an emotional one, and I feel sympathy for anyone who's gotten scammed through Kickstarter. They weren't necessarily dumb or oblivious, they were idealists and maybe even realists who wanted to share in something's creation and got duped by bad faith pitches. But while it's easy to look at these extreme scenarios on Kickstarter and discuss the backer's role in all of this, what if we looked at the massive differences of two projects that by all accounts are completely legit? Two projects in the same industry with incredible visuals, the support of established publishers, and a whole lot of buzz around them whose perception still landed on opposite ends of the spectrum because of how they engaged with fans and provided updates. Let's talk about Crowsworn, Little Devil Inside, and how a Kickstarter campaign can destroy its own hype. Little Devil Inside was funded on May 25th, 2015, a little over 7 years ago, but most people caught wind of it in the summer of 2020 when it debuted a trailer during the PS5 reveal showcase. The game had such a striking style, it looked so creative, it featured amazing enemy designs and some really promising combat, and in a showcase where we saw the first trailers for Miles Morales, Ratchet & Clank, Stray, Forspoken, Returnal, Kena, Demon's Souls Remake, and Horizon Forbidden West, somehow this little indie game out of South Korea came out as potentially my favorite game in the whole show. Over the next year or so, I'd periodically watch the trailer again and again and sought out previous footage as well since I'd heard the game had been in development for a while. In May of 2021, I put out a video talking about how this was my most anticipated game of the year, assuming of course incorrectly that it would actually release in 2021. And that video was the first time in 4 months of really making consistent content that something I'd made had blown up, comparative to my channel size at the time at least. This video gave me a lot of confidence to keep making stuff, and I partially attribute the fact that I'm still doing YouTube to Little Devil Inside because I wasn't far from giving up back then. A few months later, I put out another video on the game that did even better, and I give you this context because I want to make it clear that outside of the actual backers, there aren't many people who care about this game more than I do. I not only gravitated towards it as a consumer, but it's been imperative to the growth of this channel. You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who's more in this game's corner than I am. That said, the progression in my feelings towards Little Devil Inside is not positive, and as somebody who still engages with the dwindling community around it, I can see that downwards progression reflected in the attitudes of everyone else who follows this game. Unbeknownst to me at the time of making my first video on Little Devil Inside, there was a sour taste in people's mouths already that came from the sheer amount of time it was taking to ship out this product that people had backed over a half-decade ago. And while it was exciting for those backers to see something so significant from the game after all this time at a major showcase with the support of a major publisher, that excitement quickly turned into annoyance when they realized that there had still been no update to the release date, we had yet to see more finalized looking combat and exploration, and the developers had apparently decided to go on vacation or something after dropping this trailer because they completely abandoned their Kickstarter page, transitioning from infrequent updates with minimal information to absolutely no updates at all. You can see this shift in attitude just from the titles of my two videos on it, the first focusing on the excitement for the game and the follow-up touching on the frustration in the community. And while I noted in the second video that I still had confidence in Little Devil Inside and I think it's okay to press pause on updates and only provide them when there's something big to share, that does change a bit when the people you're updating have already invested in you and are just looking for signs of life and confirmation that progress is still being made. Little Devil Inside finally got an update just under a year and a half after its big trailer that showed off a side of the game which people were maybe the least interested in seeing, and by the time the end of the year rolled around, while I did have it as my #1 most anticipated indie game of 2022, assuming again that it actually launches this year like planned, I almost put it there as an obligation. No other game in that list made me feel as excited as I did watching LDI's official trailer or going back and looking at rough versions of the gameplay from years back, but just from the way the rollout had been handled, I was starting to feel less warm towards it, and I talked about it less like, this might be the best indie game of 2022, and more like, this might be the best indie game of 2022, massive question mark? As it stands now, with Neostream giving exactly one less than stellar update over the last 2+ years, LDI has been met with a response that's far worse than frustration or rage. No, people aren't that angry at Little Devil Inside anymore. They're apathetic. Almost everyone, whether they learned about it recently or when the page first hit, whether they were reminded of it during the October State of Play or joined the unofficial Discord, or even in my case feel like they owe the game to a degree, have had the wind completely taken out of their sails. The developers have gotten progressively worse at keeping people in the loop, and while long development times and changing schedules are understandable, not communicating those changes with the people who helped you make this product, never once putting out a beta or demo for those people, and constantly teasing the release date of the release date only to finally give something vague with continued radio silence despite that moment approaching really fast is less understandable. And not only does it bum out fans, but it hurts you as a developer, because now the people who are most excited and supportive of your product are completely ambivalent. The thing is, if Neostream was more clear during this whole process, they could have released the game after the same long period of time and even under-delivered a little bit, and they would have been better off than they are now. Because at this point, you're not just getting people on board, you have to win them over from the other side, which probably means over-delivering on all your promises. Some people are now of the mindset that this game is a scam, and while I still disagree, I think from how Sony's treating it, to the fact that we actually got some form of release window even though it might not hit it, to the fact that somewhat prominent leakers are talking about how it's coming, it does seem like the game is on its way pretty soon. But when that time comes, how good will be good enough, and will the game be able to recover from the hole that it put itself in? Little Devil Inside had the opportunity to cultivate a passionate fan base around its gorgeous art style and big ideas over the course of its development. It could have compounded on its initial excitement and created an ideal situation for itself on release, but it hasn't, and now it's facing an uphill battle. But what exactly could it have done different? Crowsworn is the only Kickstarter game that I put my own money into, and while that might sound like it introduces a bias into this discussion, I'd argue that it's not the one that you'd think. With my own hard-earned cash on the line here, this game had to do a lot more to really prove itself to me, and at this point in time, I gotta say, it's done that and plenty more. Crowsworn was funded on August 9th, 2021, with a lot more to show from the very start and a general release window already set up. It asked for $125,000 and was so impressive to people it raised 1000% of what it needed. Its visual similarities to Hollow Knight were a big factor in its interest, as well as a factor in its mild controversy, with a few people calling it a ripoff, but most others were smart enough to know that this was way more than that. The Kickstarter was updated with so many stretch goals, it feels like they added a whole new game on top of the first one, a whole bunch of extra content, free planned DLC, free upgrades to tier rewards, and even additions like VO and animated cutscenes. At every step, it felt like developer Mongoose Rodeo was ready to give back to the people that supported the game. Not only did they immediately partner with the same people that published Hollow Knight, but they did all the little things. Updates that weren't much more frequent than those of LDI before its silence in 2020, but were filled with so much more information, making the people who read them feel like actual parts of the game's creation. Live streams to discuss the game, upgrading every physical edition of the game for backers to an exclusive steelbook that looks unbelievable. Crow Kart, a jokey little side project that they built off the Bloodborne kart meme, fun enough to laugh at the janky Mario Kart clone that they made and to see a few live streams with Hollow Knight YouTubers, but not so polished that they had to sacrifice time working on the real project to make it. A free copy of the team's previous game Unworthy for everyone who pledged $20 Canadian or more, the game itself being $17 Canadian on the Steam store, an anniversary trailer, and finally, an actual short playable demo just 1 year after the game launched on Kickstarter. The demo was a single bridge with a single boss fight. A successful run took about 2 minutes, and yet the mere existence of this, much less playing it and feeling how good it felt, laid to rest any tiny piece of concern that was still in my brain. It played smoothly, the melee had a great impact to it, the systems were advanced but understandable, the boss was perfectly designed, especially since it seems like it's going to be in the early game. I didn't even realize you could charge your super shot until I beat the boss once, then I didn't realize that you could charge your pistol until I beat it twice, then after I beat it 3 times, I realized that you could charge them at the same time and just unleash the craziest combo with good spacing and awareness, and there's still so much more to the combat that I've seen in the trailers. But as good as it felt, it was just nice to know that this product was real and what was pitched is what's being worked on. Having something of this quality is definitely a bonus, but all I needed was to know that Crowsworn was actually making progress, and this 2-minute demo a year from the Kickstarter launch does exactly that, whereas 7 years of Little Devil Inside has failed to produce anything remotely similar to provide that level of confidence. Crowsworn's devs are so open, so consistent in their quality updates, and they give the impression that they really want to put their players, especially their backers, first. To the point that if the stretch goals cause this game to slip to a much later date than initially planned, most people won't have an issue with it. I know I won't have an issue with it because everyone's been put on the same page. It might be a bit unfair to compare these two given Neostream as being unbelievably ambitious for a completely new studio, and they also didn't exceed their goal by nearly as much as Crowsworn did, which gives the latter more momentum, but there's something to be said about how these are probably the two indies that I was most excited for in mid-2021 2021, and while one has managed to make me even more invested than before despite being farther away, the other has lost the majority of my interest despite being months away from its current alleged release date. I would absolutely love if Little Devil Inside came out and it was as good as it has the chance to be. There's still something so special at its core, and I do see a light at the end of the tunnel, but while I used to be shouting its name from the rooftops, I'm now just quietly hoping for it to surprise me at launch, not because it looked bad at any of its showings. In fact, ignoring some weird movement and AI, I think everything it's shown has been pretty incredible still, but because the game has simply outran my interest. Sometimes what a game does before it comes out can be just as important, if not more important than what it ends up being. Games that overpromise are responded to with vitriol, ones that poorly plan out updates can lose steam by the time they launch, and while neither Crowsworn nor Little Devil Inside have actually come out just yet, their drastically different perception right now is proof that no matter how good your idea is, no matter how similar you are to each other, and no matter how ambitious you get, you can still be seen so differently as a result of your communication alone. For anyone who's interested in current Kickstarter campaigns, you might want to check out Cloa Child of the Forest. I saw the trailer for this on IGN, and the devs actually reached out to me to see if I could cover the game on my channel. I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning, that you should not support anything on Kickstarter without doing your due diligence. This isn't me asking you to go pledge anything, and I was not paid to put this here, but I did like the mix of Ghibli, Zelda, and Hyper Light Drifter the trailer showed off, and its campaign is going on right now, so I thought I'd share it in case anyone was interested. I'm curious to know what everyone's thoughts are on Kickstarter. If you have any stories about games or other products that you've backed, whether you avoid it like the plague, let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, leave it a like. If you're new here, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.